Yes, yes. Okay, anyway, I hereby call the 8 a.m. Saturday, January 18th, 2020 City Council special meeting to order. I apologize for the snow. I'm just the mayor, don't have that much power. But I've been assured that the city manager is going to go quickly so that we can get out before too much more accumulates and you don't all have to spend the weekend here. So the first order of business is the roll call.
Councilmember Babcock, Councilmember Gregg.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens. Here. Mayor Beier.
Here. The next item is the approval of the agenda. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any changes to the agenda? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. Communication from the audience. Would anybody like to speak in the snow? Come on up, Chris Root.
I think I can do this in about 3 sentences.
Perfect.
I looked at the Strategic Priorities 2020 document by category. On the first page, Good Governance, there is an item about the Public Safety Review Board, and it says that the goal or direction is provide support to the Human Relations Commission in establishing a Public Safety Review Board. I thought it might be clearer if you're thinking about moving in the direction of the resolution that the HRC provided to Council, it might be clearer to add, so it says, provide support to the Human Relations Commission and an ad hoc task force in establishing a Public Safety Review Board. That way it'll be clear that the HRC has certain roles about helping to publicize and, help with the application process for the task force, but it's the task force that would be tasked with doing the research, including the right mix of people to actually work on the designs of the review board. So that's my suggestion.
Yes.
Hang on a second, Chris.
Hey, just want to ask you, would it be clearer if it says that they will recommend to council the establishment in creating a recommendation? Because they're not doing the creating, council ultimately will be doing that.
It says provide support to, maybe you could say design instead of establishing. Everybody understands that it's council that adopts ordinances. It's about getting some recommendations to the council. That's the stage we're in now.
Right.
But you're probably right. There could be some language improvement there too. I was focusing on the who. You're focusing on the specific task.
Result.
So we could improve both of those.
So Chris, before you leave, so this is a broad document.
Yes.
And I think what you want is covered by this sentence, and what Mr. Meadows wants is covered by this sentence. So in all of these items, so part of the support for the Human Relations Commission would be to support them in picking an ad hoc committee if we did that. I mean, I'm not.
Well,
I understand your problem, but I'm not going to support changing language to make it so specific that we have to follow something that we have not yet agreed to do. That's the problem. We haven't adopted the HRC's idea. We haven't adopted our idea. So this is broad enough that it allows anything to happen. And that's what this document's for. But I understand your point. And when we talk about this at council, come and make it again, I guess would be my recommendation.
If this is meant to be that broad,
that's the plan.
Then I understand your point about the stage we're at.
Right.
I read it and didn't know whether it meant that decision had already been
nope,
made to
it has not yet been made.
Subcommittee instead.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, of course. Anybody else from the community? All right, let's go to section 4, strategic planning. Mr. City Manager.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I'm happy to report that Public Works is out cleaning roads and has been cleaning roads all night. Though once they go by, it's snowing so much that it doesn't look like they actually clean the roads that quickly, but they're doing a great job. So I'm going to just hit some brief highlights. These are the past strategic priorities. These are the 5 categories we've had in place for about 20 years now. They've been really sort of broad enough that I think they've worked for us for all the improvements we wanted to work under. Just a couple of things just to show you the type of things we've worked on. ELPD has been out there over the past years doing lots of things in building relationships. They've had a new program, an open house, and get out there continuously to work with people in groups, to do presentations, to work with people in a positive way. Parking Task Force is being reconvened. The action plan for AARP has been submitted. This is something that when we come back to council in spring of 2020, we're going to have to talk about the expectations of what we want to do in terms of resources, because applying for this is one step, but the heavy lift comes after you apply and the expectation of what we actually implement. So this is something that we think we need to have quite a bit more discussion on in terms of moving forward. But at this point, application is in. Hopefully we'll talk more about it in 2020. Vibrant economy, lots of great things. Obviously actively encourage redevelopment of the Park District area. A huge one from over 2 years ago. Avenue Graduate Hotel under construction. A big one for us is looking for the property sale of MSU-FCU to build an office building downtown, which could also fit under enhanced DDA and DMV programs and diversify the downtown. DDA had a number of things going on, including the facade improvement program, installments of a number of murals downtown. They really focused on events this past fall. They had a great pumpkin walk that was the best attended, moved to Sunday and had over 4,000 participants. Also, in terms of that, police were down there giving out things and having a positive impact as well, which is great. Identify funding strategy for Coleman Road. A lot of the thanks goes to our own Councilmember Meadows for that. $7.6 million under construction, hopefully to be completed this spring or summer to have a ribbon cutting. Great news. Enhanced public assets, non-motorized pathways, $263,000 for safe routes to school awarded for a number of improvements. We did the Bogue Street protected bike lane. That pilot program went away after a couple of months, which it was supposed to do. Now we're looking at with MSU to see if there'll be a permanent installation of some sort along a fixed pathway in that area. Completed, actually just about to complete, $11 million of sewer improvements to the Michigan Harrison sewer area. A lot of street work done. We did the design work, or moved the design work for Evergreen Utilities approved by council in December, so that work will be commencing. Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Greenways 5 years plan was created. $1.3 million to the Northern Tier Trail improvements. This was improvements to 4 existing bridges, 2 new bridges, and a lot of trail resurfacing. Great projects funded by the county, administered by our own department. Excellent. Environmental stability, a lot of work on the lead and copper rule with lots of residents participating in our quarterly surveys. It's a lot of work to get those people to do it, and those people doing it is great for us to be able to fulfill our obligations under that. Continuing on with trying to encourage people to report basement backups and assist people in that way. In terms of energy, we've had a number of cool things happen. East Lansing Community Solar Park won Michigan Energy Innovation Business Council's Project of the Year, which is great recognition for that project. Fully built out, up and running, producing energy. The city purchased about 10% of the panels with $115,000, $120,000 of purchase. The library has a portion of those panels as well. Those panels are producing about $7,000 over this year so far. About 10 months in, we've saved about $7,000 in energy credits, which is great. So that puts the payback at about perhaps 12 years, perhaps 13 years, which is where we thought it would be. But that's up and running, and it has a way oversold list. Lots of more people want to buy those panels than there are panels, which is great. We're going to talk more about solar in our future projects. And then a massive project for us, underway already, $33 million worth solids handling and digester project, which will reduce the sludge digestion and methane gas extraction will reduce energy consumption of the plant by about 40%. We'll talk about that more in the upcoming projects as well. Sustainable high-performing government, lots of things here. Priority-based budgeting is one of the big priorities. That actually is what we're going to be presenting on in the next section, so hopefully you get to see a lot of cool data. A lot of work done by folks to put that information in, and I hope that our residents see it as extremely useful in figuring out more what their local government does. Council recaps, this was something the council wanted, was more communication. Communications department added a publication, the council recap, and it's been sent out every Wednesday. A lot of great information in it, and up to 2,750 people on the list, which is great. That doesn't necessarily mean they all open it. There's a portion that open and read it, but we're getting out to a lot of people. People are reading it. I've heard feedback about it, so good job on that. Annual trainings, 21st century policing. Police have done a lot of things in terms of trainings, in terms of outreach, in terms of working with local groups, and I think that's been an excellent endeavor. So that's the recap. The recap is a lot of work by a lot of people, 2 years of work. That whole document exists in your strategic priorities document on the iCompass. So if you have a chance to go through it, it reads just straight down, so the different colors are quarterly updates. So start at the top, and that's the oldest update, go all the way to the bottom, and that's the newest update. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that, and also thank all of our staff for the good work in putting that into place. So now I'm going to stop and say questions. That was our quick recap. I'm speeding it up, obviously, because I want to.
So can you just give us a couple of, you just give us a couple examples of targeted neighborhood mailings?
I can, if our communications person will help me with that. Michael? Was that on?
It was good governance.
I think is that construction updates?
We've done some postcards. We did some postcards during the
Just, you know.
Yeah.
campaign and our construction helped with some targeted mailings.
And also, we've been putting inserts in the water bill just to educate people about various
Awesome.
things about DPW,
Great.
gutters, sump pumps, sidewalk
Great.
projects.
If
Actually,
we have a park improvement that we're proposing, a specific park, we'll send out all the information for a community meeting or what have you to that neighborhood and invite folks to meetings.
Great. Awesome.
And
Thanks,
actually,
guys.
I hope the council got to see that yesterday we had a mailing, an e-dialogue that is focusing on our infrastructure improvements. So a lot of good information about the digester, about the pump, was it the pump station? Pump station's next time. I think it was that digester. So we're going to be doing a series of them because obviously the community's investing a lot of money in that stuff, and it's great to be able to tell our residents what we're doing. So, any other questions about past priorities? And we're ready to kick off into the next section, which is priority-based budgeting. So I'm going to give a little bit of an
Hold on
overview.
1 second, if I can.
Yes,
I
of
do have a
course.
question about the 21st century leasing, the 6 pillars there.
Yep.
Did we implement all 6 pillars of the thing? Because I don't see that from your
Yes, we have.
presentation. Okay, great.
We can, if you want to provide more detail, at some point, we're going to do that. We can provide more details. If you want more
You could
information.
send me an email. on
And
it.
actually, if you'd send us all that, that would be great, because we need to have that, because people ask us.
Certainly. Anything else? All right, so priority-based budgeting. Obviously, this has been a priority from council, as we saw, and this is the first time we're getting to sort of implement it and show it. It's been about 8 months of work to get this information into the system, to get it in the right condition, and sort of familiarize yourself with it and have it ready to be published. So it's not live yet, but what we're going to see is the open PBB portal. This is a portion of the priority-based budgeting information that I think is in the most user-friendly way, and this is the information that the public is going to be able to get, click around in, see, sort of understand what their local government, how the local government is spending money. We expect this to be live early next week, and then at that point, we'll send out some information, let our residents know that they can play on the site, look at all this information, have it all available at their fingertips. So I think that's great. So, as we move from the 2018 strategic priorities to the 2020 PBB results, we're going to be sort of morphing the strategic priorities into the PBB situation because priority-based budgeting is focusing on priorities. So if you have something you're working on that was a strategic priority, for the most part, we try to put that into a priority-based budgeting program. That's something we're going to be working on. It has the resources, the staff, the contract time, whatever it is, to be able to fulfill that priority. So that's what you're seeing here. In order to make it work, we had to sort of break out enhanced public assets and break it into sort of 2 broader categories. Enhanced transportation and infrastructure, so those are pretty broad categories of infrastructure, and then recreation and cultural opportunities. So you see it aligns pretty well. This is something we already brought to council 5 months ago, 6 months ago or more, and had the approval for that, but I just want to show you how it lines up with our past. And now we're getting rid of these, and we're going to these. And that's sort of the transition to PBB for priorities. Any questions about that?
I do have one question.
Sure.
For enhanced transportation infrastructure, that's not just like vehicular transportation, that addresses like safe streets,
Yep,
infrastructures as well?
streets,
Okay.
walkability,
Awesome, thanks.
you got it.
If you guys have some questions, you can
And
just ask.
infrastructure, we're also putting like government buildings in there. I mean, it's broad.
Okay, got it, cool.
So PBB is a decision-making tool. So the goal of PBB is to give you lots of good information, and with that information, to be able to ask questions and say, what can we do differently? How are we doing this? Are there ways we can do something better? So we got to think of PBB as it's not a budget. So this does not replace the budget that you actually work on and approve and that Jill has to prepare. But it looks at that information in a different way that I think is a lot more useful for our customers. So it shows the cost of city services and how they align with goals. So looking at programs and seeing how it aligns with our goals. Year 1 of implementation. So I want to just put a little caveat or an asterisk on the year 1 implementation. We have taken a ton of data and put it into this program. Put it into these programs. And there are going to be things that we find where we say, that didn't turn out exactly perfectly. We should, by the second year, I'm hoping that the data will be much better. The data, I think, is very good and very useful, but when you see the number of programs, how many programs do we have? Is it 600? 500 programs of city services there, and then you're putting all of your staff time, all of the operating costs, all of the contracts, everything into a program. There's going to be some opportunities where at the end of that process you went, you know, if I had to do that again, I might have tweaked that a little bit or changed it a little bit. So for instance, I allocate my time by 5% or 10% or 15% blocks, and that's something that I think that as we learn the process, the data will improve the second year. But I think the data we have is excellent. I just want to put that little caveat because, like I said, this is a new process for us, and allocating it is, the first time, is a challenge. So PBB can help find opportunities for efficiencies and growth. I think you'll see that when we look at the data, what we're talking about with that. So this is showing in terms of the prioritization of the current budget, right, the current PBB years. And I think what it shows actually, the quartiles show in terms of you want to have more of your PBB priorities focusing on the most intensive quartile, the quartile one, which is going to be the things that are your highest priority. So we're going to get to a tree plot that's going to show intensity of priorities, and you'll get to see what are the things that are actually hitting more on your more direct priorities. So PBB only allows you to fill the toolbox, not overflow it. Only 100% of staff can be allocated to programs. So what this means is if City Council wants the Department of Parks and Recreation to work on something, we only allocate 100% of the time. So if you want, let's just take the town, because Tom ends up with lots of projects. A good example is the all of the review of policies, all of the review of the planning areas that we're going to be working on. Those things all have to be allocated. So if we're going to keep adding things, the logic of this process is that you take or eliminate or remove things or do something different to be able to allow people to do that. So that's essentially what this does in terms of the planning process. Part of the logic is also if you're adding new programs that are potentially a higher priority, that you look at other programs that you may not want to do that are a lower priority, and then potentially look to eliminate, have someone else provide that service, something like that. So that's essentially what some of this tool does in terms of looking at priorities. So this is open PBB at a glance. This is the City of East Lansing, and this is our data. And I think there's already, when you look at this, a lot of cool information here. This is about $70 million of our operation. What's not in here is going to be our capital and our debt service. But whenever I talk about the budget, I always say Public Works is our biggest operation. It's broken into funds, so you really don't get to see that. Well, here you actually get to see it. So the relative size of these boxes is the relative size of the resources allocated to these priorities. How dark the box is the relative strength of the priority. How close is it directly to being a priority for the local government? Now, that is not to say that when something is light, a light color, meaning lower priority, it means it's not important and we shouldn't do it in the future. That is not the case. But what it means is that things that are mandated, things like police patrol or putting out fires, are going to have a heavier emphasis and be a heavier priority. Things that are more optional that may be provided by the market elsewhere may be a lower priority. That doesn't again mean that you're going to get rid of those programs. It just means that it's a way of looking at it in terms of perhaps asking questions, perhaps looking at the information and data and making decisions about it. So legacy costs are here, and you'll see that it's a very large chunk of the government. And that's good information to have. It's not necessarily the picture we want to show, but it's there, and that's part of the transparency of showing this. It's all gray like that because it wasn't scored. So it wasn't scored because it's a fixed cost. We decided not to score it. Something else that wasn't scored is this little gray box here, and that's City Council. We have a City Council, wasn't scored, not a priority. So we did not score. Because the reason is because we have to have a city council. We're a home rule city. We have a charter. By charter, we have a city council. So we didn't want to say whether, what's the priority, what's the mandate. Obviously, you have to have a city council to run a city. So everything else has
I don't know
been
about that
scored
one.
and is.
Wait a minute, where's the city manager's office?
That is super dark. As dark as this shirt.
Can ours be like in pink or something?
That's what we're dressing in.
Sparkles, glitter. Yeah.
Is the size correct though, for city council?
You are getting a hell of a
Just
deal
the
out
color.
of us. Just
In terms of the
saying.
budget, yes. So, the size of the box shows the relative cost of the program.
But what
You can
about our
see,
pension?
We always mention that we have this massive size wastewater.
What about our
plant.
boats?
Yeah, what about the pensions that we have?
What's that?
So what about the pensions that we have? Is
And
there-
derailing on the
What about
Come
the
on.
pension?
And the city council boat.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Our private yacht, our party
At
boat.
one point,
That's what I
when we were
read.
talking about expanding the city, we said we wanted to keep expanding until we got to a harbor or something.
Yeah, we
So-
wanted
yeah.
an arena.
We wanted an arena, a marina,
Yes.
that's
All
right.
right, sorry.
I'd like to see
So
that.
obviously, the bigger the box, the bigger the operation. We got that. The entire tree plot shows $71 million. Again, debt's not in there, and capital spending. Shade of the box shows how it aligns with the program and selected criteria. We got that already. So now, these are the program, the select results. These are the results we showed you. We switched from the priorities to these. So this is going to be what those priorities are scored against in terms of scoring to get to the darkest intensity. And it's also going to be these. So these are overall the mandate, the reliance, the cost recovery, the demand, and the population served. So if a program serves 10 people, it's going to be very low on population served. If it serves everybody, it's going to be higher. So these, the factors that we saw, the priorities before results, and these are basically what gives you your scoring of the intensity of the box. Does that make sense? And actually, when we did the scoring, we actually have different groups doing the scoring, interdepartmental groups of employees, and then they're actually rescored and checked for validity to make sure that we're scoring them properly. So it's actually, I think, a very good process in terms of how that works. So quartiles show the program's relative alignment with the city's results and program attributes. Click I for a step-by-step tutorial. So when the site is live, you can go to I and it will show you how to navigate through this, which is a cool feature. So this is what it's going to look like when you come onto the OpenPBB site once we have it live. You'll be able to click on the various tabs to show what they are, and then it links the priorities below it by that priority showing what hits upon environmental overall, what hits on infrastructure, and what has those intensity of programs as well. So it's really cool information. So with that, any questions about, I'm going to switch to PBB, a quick thing from my perspective of, okay, so now I'm in the portal.
Can I ask one question? Are we going to define a little bit more like population served? I'm just curious about how that's determined. Are we going to go into that?
No,
Okay.
not at this point, but I can
Okay.
give you more information about how we did the scoring.
That would be great.
Yes. So this is the portal. This is looking at the tree plot, is what this is called, and this is the live site. And you can see as I'm mousing over stuff, a lot of great information. You have to be a little careful because when you start going over these things, it can get a little bit annoying if you're jiggling the mouse around because you keep popping up what's under the program. So you can see that this is a live site with a lot of good data in it. This is the overall tab. If I were to change the tabs, it changes the intensity of that. Changes the colors based on that particular tab. So let me hit the overall first because, well, I kind of already hit the overall, but I want to go into mine and then we're going to have some directors go into their departments, give you a quick overview so you can look at it, how the data works. This is also useful, I think, to give a good sort of overview of what the big departments are doing in terms of spending money. So again, we see here, I'll click into executive. Clicking into executive. So this is the best way to navigate the site. You go back to overall and you can back up. We're in the executive right now, which is going to be legal, mayor and city council, city manager's office. So legal prosecution, you can click on it and you can see, because it's a contract, it's not actually seen as, there's no FTE there. Total cost of the program, $222,000. General legal services, this and this box together are going to be the city attorney's office primarily, because they're the ones who do legal prosecution through the court. They're also the ones who do general legal counsel for city council and for staff. $170,000, again, 0 FTE because it's under contract. Legal defense is going to be a combination of lawsuit defense, so that could be our city attorney and counsel be outside attorneys. So that's the legal, all done through contracts. I'll do city manager next. So, city operations oversight and management. High intensity of color, because obviously that's the city's purpose of running the city. Total cost, $93,000, FTE 0.4. So 0.4 FTE is probably going to be mostly my time and some of Nicole's time, so this is going to be 2 people allocated into all these departments. There'll be one place where other staff are allocated into this department, and I'll show you that program in a second here. So that's what you're looking at when you see this. This is a portion of my time. Personnel costs, $75,000. Non-personnel costs are going to be anything else, fixed costs, computers, anything else attributed to a portion of overseeing the city operation. Priority-based budgeting as a program was put into the city manager's office, executive office. This has 0.4 FTE. That is a very small portion of my time and Nicole's time, but it's also a portion of all of the directors and people's times who put PBB into the process. So this should include the entire cost of the PBB program. So personnel cost, $42,000. That's the cost of administering it, putting the data in, keeping the data right. Non-personnel cost is going to be the cost of the contract for the PBB site, because this is a proprietary product we're using. So that's the only one that's going to have different staff in my department, because they're doing a portion of their work in this area. Communications with council is a broad category. It's basically all of my and Nicole's work in support of council. So everything from sitting in council meetings to selling you the council manager to the weekly, bi-weekly meetings that we have, personnel, myself and Nicole again. Goal setting and strategic planning. This, following the priorities, the keeping the priorities document, the meeting with staff to check on priority progress, working on individual projects. Governmental affairs, state and legislative advocacy. We see here, this is basically lobbying with the state, right? FTE 0, cost $25,000. That's a contract that we use for our lobbyists, so there's no FTE. You could say I have a small portion of my time here because I need to talk to the lobbyist on occasion, but it's less than 5%, so when you get to a de minimis level, we don't allocate that time anymore. So we're not going to put 1% of my time in that. That's why it looks like that. So primarily, basically done through a contract. Priority project intervention. So this is when, as from potentially looking at your perspective, I go in to assist something moving forward, or I get in the way of something and have to cause all sorts of hassle for my directors, because I want to hear how something is going, move something along, see if there's any problems between departments. That's what that would be. Citizen and constituent inquiries. 0.1 FTEs. This is my and Nicole's time working with residents who have concerns, passing it off to departments, getting back to them, meeting with them, so on. Regional intergovernmental affairs. This is meeting with other regional entities, MSU, quarterly meeting with MSU, Meridian Township, whoever we meet with. I meet with the middle and mid managers and so on. And from there, staff celebrations, meeting support. This is my coffee with the city managers, our picnic, our award ceremony, all the things we do. Our quarterly staff meetings, like I said, also the staff, and that's myself and Nicole's time as well. Emerging Leaders Program, this is primarily Nicole's time, but this is also Nicole. This would be the other staff who help you with it, potentially, because we have other staff from other departments that help Nicole run the Emerging Leaders as a sort of team approach. Economic development and business recruitment, so this is a little bit of my time when I meet with the site plan team and all of that. And community committees, so this is my time meeting out, going to Rotary, going to any of the other operations that I participate on. So, does that give you a sense of this? For council, policy creation, this is your primary duty, obviously, policy creation. Agenda management is time spent from council. This actually also includes the council staff. So this would be Emily and Jackson's time allocated to council. So you can see the FTE, policy creation. This is going to be preparing the minutes for council, preparing that. This will be preparing the agenda management process. So my time potentially, the mayor's time potentially, Emily's time potentially putting the agenda together. legislative support, and ceremonial events. So last one was boards and commission support. So that's your time supporting boards and commissions. So this is the executive leadership of the city, and that information is here. Questions?
I just want to make sure I know where the personnel cost is. Is that a function of the FTE versus average salaries of the people that are doing that, or where does that come from?
Say again?
The costs that are associated with that, is that just a multiplying out the FTE
Yeah, so
portion?
what it does literally, like each director, like what Jennifer would have done, I think, did you do this one or did you do this one? I think
We did.
yeah, so Jennifer actually would look and take all of her employees and allocate their time. So she would look at Emily's time and say, how much time does Emily spend at council meetings and in support of council communication, emails, everything else? And she would ascribe 20% of her time to this. She might ascribe 20% of her time to agenda management. And then a proration of 20% of Emily's time, plus her benefits, plus everything, rolls into this. There'll also be
It's by person.
potentially my time is in agenda management, where you can click, there's deeper depths of information that we're not showing.
So if we allocated a color to every employee in the department and then overlaid that, it's not an average of the department, it's individual people.
It's individual people, but some of them, because the programs get touched upon by lots of people, have lots of good.
So to do this process, we basically uploaded the fiscal year 20 original budget that we provided to council. So we uploaded all of those numbers. Every person, when we do the budget, has a dollar amount attached to them, right? Their salary, their benefits, all those things. So we uploaded every person into this program, and then departments allocated that person. So it took that exact percent of their package, their compensation package. And then we also uploaded all the other line items from the budget, and people had to allocate those to programs as well. So this is based on the fiscal year 20 preliminary budget that was provided to council back in April of 19.
And then the non-personnel costs would be like
Office
copy
supplies,
paper.
contract
It's the
services.
buildings, it's computer,
Yeah.
it's everything that
Utilities.
computer runs to run the operation.
George, could you
Contracts.
click on just, I mean, even if you go into another, wherever you want to go, I want you, if you click into an actual program, you can see the pie chart. I think that's helpful for people. Go into like, yeah, that one. It'll go up, then we click that one more time. So this is like drilling in. And so like this will show you that the personnel costs and personnel costs.
I love
And you
it.
can click into operating costs and you can see more, like that's contract services.
So computer, this is a
It's
portion
very
of computer that we pay, office supplies, employee parking permits. And this is not the full cost of the employee parking permit. This is the cost, if you allocate 40% of my time to running the city operation, this is 40% of my time for these exact costs. You know what I mean? So it really gets, I mean, it's granular. This is
So
great information.
every part of your compensation package is divided among all of your duties.
My full compensation is divided amongst all the programs that I serve, and I have to allocate 100%. I have to allocate everything, but I can't allocate 105%.
Right.
So in 5% blocks. So it's not, that's why I said, yeah, I got to think, I might spend time in legislative affairs, but maybe it's 1%. It doesn't show up here.
And anytime you have like an FTE or a person charged somewhere, you're likely going to have all of these other little categories like computer rental, office supplies, because basically we say have those types of categories follow the person.
They go with the person.
So I had a question about the 100% thing, because we do have a lot of overtime in police. So like if we said we want to do this because of this big problem, we wouldn't go to PBB and say, well, if you want to do that, you got to cut this. They'd just be overtime.
Overtime is also allocated, so police would have to say, why do we have overtime? And they would allocate that to
Okay.
that program.
So yeah, so if they had like $250,000 of overtime for a year, chief may allocate 20% of that because he knows that's MSU game day.
Okay.
It might even be reimbursed by MSU, that portion. And then 20% might be downtown, fun time activities, security for events, whatever.
Got it.
And so I think this is sort of really cool data, and I think it has a lot of potential for folks who have an interest in stuff. So hopefully you see that this was a pretty in-depth look here. So what we're going to do now, and I think the cool thing also, like I said, you can see when you look at the overall government, is we know Public Works, Police, Fire, Parks and Recreation, and we can see all the departments in terms of their size. This is PBB, no, not PBB, this is Planning, Building, and Development. This one, the label doesn't show up because it's a long side.
So
You might want to
important.
put like planning or something. Anyway, so with that, I'm going to switch over to the chief, our first chief and then our second chief, and then we'll go from chief to Parks and Rec, to Public Works, to Planning, or Planning's third. And then those are the 5 departments we'll do. If you want to hear any more after that, we can do other departments after that, but in the interest of time, we're going to try to cut it short and just do that. But other directors and managers are here to do their departments if you want to do that information. With that, Larry?
Good morning. I will hit the highlights of the police department. You can see we're going to start with patrol operations. It's a $2.8 million cost to operate patrol. We have 41 employees assigned to that operation. The face of the police department, these are the proactive patrols, prevent criminal activity, reinforce traffic safety. We respond to approximately 22,000 calls for service annually, both emergency and non-emergency. And in our traffic safety, we initiate approximately 22,000 traffic stops annually. And we enforce local and state laws, investigate criminal complaints, and obviously we address quality of life issues. That's a high priority for us.
Do you want to hover over patrol operations just for 1 second to show them just to show them that you might have to scroll up to see it. There we go. So that 22 FTE is a portion of all the employees that are in patrol. There's more employees than that, but that is a portion of them that actually do patrol work. So allocating their time to that as opposed to other programs. So that's why it's the biggest program we have in police. Thanks.
Good. Next, we're going to move on to community policing, and you'll see it's a $790,000 operation. It's a department-wide effort. We've switched from having one person in charge of it. We had a lieutenant that has been in charge of it. We're transferring that this next budget cycle to the officer level and making it a department-wide operation. It'll also be a reduced cost to operate the program. It's developing a close working relationship within our community, and really that's what we're all about. It's a cornerstone of our agency. It includes neighborhood watch programs to address quality of life issues, obviously, safety presentations, crime resolution, and again, special community events. Neighborhood Watch is one of them, but Safe Halloween, bicycle parades, being present at all the festivals, and things of that nature. We move on to PACE. That's everybody's favorite program, I think, at least some of our residents. Where are we with PACE? Right here. PACE, we have 9 employees. 7 of them are part-time, 2 full-time. It's a $512,000 operation. For civil parking and code enforcement, provide the crossing guard program actually falls under PACE, and that is a challenge each and every year for staffing. And they maintain the impound lot, log of the impounded vehicles, mopeds, bicycles, and they actually handle the police auction when that time comes. Our Detective Bureau is another crime investigations, $477,000 operation. We have 8 employees in our Detective Bureau. They manage crime scenes and investigations, solve crimes through crime scene processing, evidence collection. They seek warrants through the prosecutor's office or sometimes the city attorney's office. And they meet with area police agencies to discuss current crime trends.
Chief, can you hold on 1 second?
So, just really quickly, back to PACE. How many of those, and we talked about this during the parking task force, but how many of those are actual PACE officers that are out in the community?
They would be about 6.
6. And that, by the way, for the rest of council is 1 person per each shift. So there's 1 member of the PACE that's out there because we're fairly understaffed in that area right now.
Occasionally we'll have overlapping shifts, but you're right, primarily it's 1.
So we're going to point that out.
We move on to our jail. It's a $406,000 operation with 9 employees. Again, 5 part-time, 4 full-time. Obviously, they process, lodge, and release our adult prisoners that are arrested on court orders, local ordinance violations, state and federal laws. They process and release juvenile offenders. And they monitor, I don't know if everybody knows this, they monitor our in-house city alarm system for City Hall. The alarms ring into our jail. They call dispatch answers the call to our police department.
Can you move the pointer up onto jail? I just want to see the breakdown.
Jail.
Jail.
You were there.
And that includes infrastructure, obviously. Got it. Learning the lingo. Thanks.
Okay. And the last one I have is our Records Bureau. It's a $272,000 operation with 4 employees. They provide support for our entire police department, provide customer service to the public, and they accept and process freedom of information requests, and that is no small task, increasing every year. You know the number that we had this 3,000. And they maintain our record system. There's a lot more that goes into that job, but that's a brief overview. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
I do have one question. The community outreach versus community policing, what's the, like?
We're merging them.
Oh, okay.
That was, the community outreach was a lieutenant position.
Okay.
We're actually going to merge that
And
into community policing to go department-wide.
Okay, so that the community outreach box will disappear and kind of
It'll
the
be
community
blended
policing
to-
will get bigger. Got
Yes.
it. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. So I just want to, as Chief Talifarro is coming up, I just want to sort of show that there's, if you go back to police just 1 second. Sorry. There's a lot of information here that obviously we're not going to go through it all and click through everything for you, but the patrol division does so much stuff that, you know, you can go through on your own and look back at all the programs, but we're sort of just giving you the overview and the big picture and trying to show you the big gears of moving things here, but there's a lot of good information here that you can go through to your point.
Hey, just really
Talifarro's
quickly,
gonna go over the fire.
to keep the moving meeting and making sure that we're not going too in depth on things, at some point I'd love an explanation of the community policing, the shift in policy from the lieutenant to kind of the ground level. That can be an email follow-up, but
Okay.
thanks.
Chief Talifarro.
Good morning, everyone. We are, excuse me. So much like police, we took and separated our time and our staff hours, which to try to reflect the business that we are trying to do each day. Now, we have some differences in that many of most of our personnel are cross-trained, so we have 48 firefighters on duty every day. And, well, not on duty every day, shift, 16 per shift, and then without leave time, we begin to strip away some of the personnel. But our personnel are cross-trained, so many of our personnel will do multiple functions. So if you look at EMS, for example, let me see here. You might see 12.8 FTEs. Well, that's the amount of time of those individuals over the course of a year to build out the budget. And you'll see, for example, in all hazard in the training, which would be inclusive of fire, EMS, emergency management, and other types of training, you see some FTE assignments there. But those aren't actually positions that are solely responsible for doing those tasks. Those are some of our staff time that is dedicated to each of those efforts. And so what I'd like to point out in ours is that first we do a lot of EMS, and I think that's one of the things that I've often said that we should more accurately be described as an emergency services department, because we perform fire, EMS, water rescue, high angle rescue, confined space, urban search and rescue, and so many different functions that, you know, I think it gets lost in our title. But when I polled our staff, they were very traditional and wanted to hold on to the title of fire department. And I just think it's a little bit less descriptive for what we actually do. We have defined also like our pension care report. So this is a little bit closer to some of the records management too. We do some of our fire reporting also is included in the other areas. But the importance of that is just to show how big of a role analytics and data and records management is. And I think you heard that from Chief Sparks. We have the same we have the same responsibilities, and many of those responsibilities are mandated. We have to do electronic EMS reporting by law that gets uploaded into the hospitals and other things. So much of our time after they deliver a patient is then doing the reporting, then doing the follow-up to upload it into our service and get it to the places it has to go. And so it is very time-consuming, but I think it is a necessary responsibility. We look at categories like our special operations, and I mentioned earlier, this is where we're having conversations as we move along in the PBB process. We kind of categorize everything in there outside of fire and EMS. But there are a number of functions that could be broken out individually if you wanted to reference them as programs, for instance, hazardous material response, again, or water rescue, or ice rescue, or any of those things. They're all tasks that we perform that are kind of captured in that area of special operations. I like that we can also begin to perhaps break out costs that are associated to the university. Now, this is not to say that we wouldn't be doing any of these things without the university, but when you look at a department our size, typically many of these responsibilities would not be in a department of our size. So when you look at high ankle rescue, some of the hazmat, some of the things that are going to be the result of having an FRIB and a cyclotron and all of those things, they require significantly more planning. They require the time engaged in all that training activity to be able to perform those functions. And I think, these areas here, the special operations, the MSU planning, would probably be much smaller and much less relevant if you were to look at, say, a comparable city like Kentwood or something like that.
Sure.
And so I think it helps us to be able to at least kind of identify those things, I think, a little bit more succinctly. I think where I would see also other benefit is that we can begin to see trends. I mean, we obviously were tracking trends and looking at things that are becoming more important and taking more or less time. And so when you see things like the patient care reporting again, or some of our, plan review would be a good one, Okay, that's a direct result of things that are beginning to happen with the construction and the development that takes place. So we spend a lot more time, and so we need more assets and resources. So when I look at it in terms of how we allocate resources in futures planning, as we see some of those areas grow, and then public outreach and other, then that obviously would indicate to us that we need to be thinking a little bit more about our fire prevention division and some of those other areas, because they are getting more taxed and more stressed. And so I would also point out that some boxes, while small, and you can see, say, arson investigation, it may not take out a lot of time because we're in a community that fortunately has a pretty good housing stock. You don't have a lot of burn for profit or burn for crime. You get more accidental burns. There are some, occasional burn for profit and those types of things, and crime, but it's probably much less than many other communities, and it doesn't take as much time out of our equation and our operations. So, but it is certainly an important function. So I would say that as the public, as council looks at things, you begin to understand that some of these things, while small, they may be things that are mandatory or extremely important. And social media is another, for example. The expectation for us to push out information to people and to get things out, especially during times of crisis and emergency, and to be instantaneous and all of those things, that would have been non-existent a few years ago. And so I think it does help with trending. I don't know, over our budget, I didn't state that to begin with, we're at $10.3 million. We have 48 people assigned to fire suppression. That includes our officers. Those are other questions we get. Well, why don't we reduce the number of officers, keep the number of firefighters, or some things like that? Well, all of our people do all of the work. And so many times when we go out, we have to have a field supervisor with a crew that's on scene at an emergency or fire to manage the incident. But they also perform firefighting tasks, and they also assist with EMS and some of those other job responsibilities. And so when we look at it from, again, we have 5 support positions. That includes myself, an administrative assistant. We have 3 in fire prevention, and then we have a training person. And then, I'm sorry, we have, so 54, we have a half-time cadet also. Now, not even a half-time, it's probably about a third time, but that's an important point too, because you'll see in our strategic priorities the need to enhance the cadet program. What we're experiencing is just complete dearth or lack of applicants. We currently have 5 positions that are open or open, and we have about 7 applications, and we've been advertising, recruiting, doing different things for more than 8 months. And some of those candidates may come with different things, areas of concern, so it's really getting difficult for us to recruit. And so I can especially see a period where we're going to have to begin to train and build our own through the cadet program. And one of
Is that possibly because we require them to be cross-trained? Or we just
yes, it's
a
certainly
higher
the
level of
paramedic
expertise?
license is probably the biggest problem, but I don't want to take too much time, but there was a change in the state law many years back requiring or allowing for restricting cities from having residency. So you can't require residency of more than a 20 or 25 mile radius. Well, one of the unintended consequences of that, there's a little known kind of exception to that says except for volunteer and paid on call fire departments because of the cost of training for firefighters. And so what's happened is that in career departments, areas like East Lansing, larger departments, you can't train firefighters without putting them in your workers' comp system. And so most career paid on call and volunteer come from surrounding areas where they are in their workers' comp system and compensated in some ways. And so that's been very problematic for us to get people that can go through the training at our cost. And then if you look at the training for a paramedic, it'll take about a year if you do an accelerated academy style. If you go beyond, if you do a traditional, it could be up to 2 years. And then if they fail the paramedic test, don't get their license, then you've just wasted a year and a half or 2 years trying to train someone. And so if we have them in a cadet program, we may get people that will start with us. We can help them offset their school costs while they're going through the paramedic program, through their salaries, not through payment of the tuition, different things. And then they get familiar with us, but we also get to evaluate them, get familiar with them. And so if they're a good performer, we obviously hope we will be appealing to them, and vice versa. We will have an inside track. So those are the types of things that might require resources at a future date, but I think the important thing from the city manager and finance and your perspective is that obviously if you have to redirect more funds and resources to one program, is at what expense to other programs? Or and I guess I'll end here because I know it's been long, is that, or you look at other trends. So some things that may not be as big of a responsibility now, you can shift and reallocate that money to those areas that are becoming more of a concern. I think there was one other thing.
Randy, while you're thinking about that thing, do you have in there, can you break out where we serve places that are not East Lansing, like when we go up to Bath? Can you break that out in there at all or not?
We could, I suppose, identify a category.
No, I just wondered if it was already in there.
It's not in there now because we put all of our fire suppression and all of our EMS runs are all captured in there. Again, I think we could look at the trends for mutual aid and automatic aid. I think what I found historically is that they're going up, but we're receiving more as well. So it's going up in both directions.
Yeah, if it's, I don't want to break into one of your boxes, but I mean, no, you're going to have to reduce a box to do this. If you have to, I don't want you to. But I would like to know how much, what portion of our budget, how much money, or how you would put it in here, we spend specifically going north, because I think that's where we go the most, unless there's an emergency in Lansing. I'm not talking about I'm not talking about places that we actually get mutual aid from as well. I'm talking about where it's one way.
Yeah.
So it's not really mutual.
I see. And I think what I would also say is that that's where that records management and data analytics, we could drill down. So by being able to build up those systems, we can track that information better and disaggregate it better. So it may not be reflected as a box here in mutual, in the PBB, but it would be an element of our patient records management and patient care reporting, and we could provide you that information as requested.
Okay.
I think the last thing I would say is, when you look at some of the revenue sides, we have, I think that as I believe what's happening is when you look at revenue, it's also being allocated to other areas as it's required. So you look at EMS, for example, we generated about $1.2 to $1.3 million in revenue, but some of that revenue also has to buy rigs, also has to pay for finance, staff time, and other things. And so I think it's not as clean to see the revenue side perhaps as it is on the expense side, and that's something that I think would require further discussions when you go through the budgeting process.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Chief. So one thing I mentioned is just a quick thing on fire is in the past when we've looked at mutual aid, the city has been giving more ambulance runs and receiving fire assistance. But when it looks at it overall from the entire region, it balances out pretty nicely. So we give the assets we have and we receive fire assistance.
But
So
there are some
that are more loafers.
Yeah.
Like they're
well, it's
they're
just
the
they don't
takers.
have the staff.
Yes,
so.
exactly. So Lansing may give us more fire support, and we may give Lansing more ambulance support, but Bath may take more support and not give as much. But as a region, we actually benefit about as much as we give. That's what we looked at in the past, and you've shown me those reports in the past, so we can show that information. Tom?
Good morning. So planning, building, and development, I think of it as sort of all the things on the continuum of the built environment, from kind of concept, chatting with developers or community members interested in the project, all the way to inspecting the electrical systems that are being put into these buildings, and then helping businesses locate within the commercial parts of these buildings, and then helping them be successful when they're there, and then planning for the future of our city. So really everything along that whole continuum is planning, building, and development. We're separated into 5 divisions. So we have the planning and zoning folks, the community and economic development team, the housing team, the building team, and the parking team. And you'll see this big bucket here, redevelopment support. So this mainly is the funds that we capture in terms of tax increment revenues, and then reimburse to developers, and also a portion of which comes to the Brownfield Authority as fees to offset some of the costs that we have. We also, in this bucket, there is, I think, some debt service related to projects like Avondale Square, things that were directly redevelopment that the city desired and made a priority. So that is a lion's share of our budget and our activities. You can see the non-personnel, or the personnel is really about a half of a FTE, and that's really the folks it takes to administer all the active brownfield plans that we have. There's under the auspices of several state entities that we need to do reporting on an annual basis, etc. And there's a fair amount of time that goes into that.
Is there a breakdown of those plans, like in the pie chart that was kind of showed before?
Not on the pie chart, but it is something that we have on our website in terms of a summary of all the plans. You can see certainly the Park District and Center City are fairly large in terms of the new plans, and so this number will continue to grow as those come online as well. We have 16 active plans, including Center City and Park District.
Gotcha.
The budget document also lays out each individual
Awesome.
plan, just if you want to reference back to that,
Yep.
or when it comes out in April.
And we had 17 until a couple months ago when you guys terminated the Campus Village one. So in terms of other activities, I won't go into all of them. Obviously, you can see the DDA's sidewalk and infrastructure projects. This is essentially their project development fund, so the main thrust of a lot of the DDA's efforts. The current project on the books will be the sidewalks along Grand River, adjacent to the Center City project. And we're hoping to get that in the ground starting May 10th. We also have a smart zone where we capture some funds. 10 years ago, the DDA, the city, and others were instrumental in creating the Technology and Innovation Center that's repurposed the Jacobson's building. That has had a fair amount of success now, and we continue to support the programs that they have to support entrepreneurship and hopefully create new tenants for offices in downtown and elsewhere in East Lansing. We do a fair amount of maintenance and repairs with DDA funds as well. This is things like, when graffiti happens, when we want to do kind of new benches, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the community economic development, building and code. You can see inspections, kind of the work that goes into the plan review and permitting, and those sorts of things, kind of smaller buckets, but still important. We have kind of ADA transition planning and enforcement, floodplain management, etc. This is housing here. A lot of what we do in housing is the annual kind of 13-month rental inspections and license renewals. But you can see we also spend a fair amount of time, for instance, consulting with citizens. So we get a lot of questions, especially from new students and their parents regarding our rental program and regarding the issues that they have out there. And then I wanted to also point out planning or parking is not really part of that tree for whatever reason, but we have kind of maintenance and operations of the lion's share, along with customer service, which is mainly a people-based function. The operations, this is really the money that it takes to run our software. We have a maintenance contract. I think the lion's share of this is really credit card fees. As you can imagine, most people now use credit cards in our system. And I think that's the end of my 5 minutes, but I will take any questions that you have.
So I guess I'm hung up on the staffing and the overtime issue. So I like the idea of priority-based budgeting, because if we want to do something new, we have to look at this and say, all right, which one of these squares do you want to make smaller so that we can do this other square? But I also know that we ask you to do things and we don't ask you to take something away, just you in particular, because I do that to you. So I know that in specific. So my question is, will this work for that, or will you just have to work more hours and make your pie bigger so you can say, I'm adding this new slice?
So I want to answer that because
yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't want to put you in a bad spot.
Yeah, it gets to a level of detail.
Yeah.
So if you're asking him to review something and come up with an answer that takes 10 hours of time over a year, it's not going to move the dial on this.
Okay.
It's when you ask them to do something that is big enough that it changes the shape of the programs they provide and the things they do.
Okay.
It's also, this is not going to drive your decision making, and we're not going to say, well, you cannot do that because of this, and you cannot put that program in.
Okay.
The idea is to use it as a tool so that when you're adding things that are significant changes, you're also thinking about what are we taking away and what are we doing less.
Okay, all right.
But it's not going to say, we're not going to say, you can't ask him that because it's going to take 10 hours. But the idea is that if you're giving someone a project that has enough significance that it's going to take a significant amount of time and resources, is that we should put it into priorities, put it into priority-based budgeting, make a program, and then think about what we're not going to do.
Okay.
But that's the discipline of the process. That's what it's supposed to be able to do. But I wouldn't be too constrained by the individual questions and projects. 100%. Does that help?
Too bad for you.
And then one other thing I want to mention is the one line that is not right up here when we're scrolling over it is revenue. So we're going to pull that off by the time it opens, just because that one did not get the attention. We're putting expenses and costs in. So if you saw revenue pop up, completely disregard revenue. But when it goes live, we're not going to have revenue up there at this point.
We will in the future. I think it's just we haven't had the time and
It takes a while, yeah,
to make sure
allocate.
it's correct.
I need to remember to bring my glasses with me to these meetings because I'm old.
You can open it up on the
What is it?
No, not live yet.
Oh, and also he's live.
Yeah. No, it's all right. I'll have more questions when I can get into it, and then I'll bother you all.
Yeah.
No.
That's my plan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing this morning?
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Super
It
duper.
was good to cancel this meeting because that allowed us to keep this building open because we've got several hundred people coming in the building today. We've got, I can't tell you as much as we got going on. We've got buddy basketball league, we've got youth basketball league, we've got swimming, we've got fitness center, we've got parties, we've got all kinds of things going on for the children's theater and what have you. So thank you for having this meeting, although I know it was kind of a tough thing for everyone, but thank you. Canceling is not a good thing. So anyway, the Parks and Recreation Department, what we do, your Parks and Recreation Department, what we do here is we encourage active, healthy, creative, and environmentally friendly lifestyles. That's sort of everything that we try to stay within that sort of framework, and we move forward that way. So we see government buildings up here, which is a little bit separate. That's a separate budget. It's a general fund item. But aside from that particular item, in the budget right now, the Parks and Recreation Fund is a $4.5 million budget. We generate about $2.4 million a year in what we call earned income, which is income through fees and charges and rental use and what have you like that. So about 53% of the costs that we have associated with the operation of the Parks and Recreation Fund comes through fees and charges and what have you. But then, and then we have the general fund contribution or general fund transfer of about $2.1 million. So I'd like to sort of make that point. We have probably, you'll see, I think 60-some thousand hours of FTE, which comes out to about almost 40 FTEs. We got 14 full-time employees, but the rest of our employees in the Parks and Recreation Department are all part-time. Probably 30 or 40 regular part-time, not, well, year-round part-time, not regular part-time, and probably at different times of the year we may have over 100 seasonal employees. Like when aquatic center's open, there may be 65 employees in the aquatic center, primarily all part-time. But starting with the government buildings function, that's about an $800,000 per year operation. Our finance director has a way of assigning some of those expenses to the various departments and what have you throughout the course of the year. But the main thing right now in the government buildings budget is the city hall repairs and maintenance, and obviously city hall custodial services. That's the cost of having city hall available as far as maintenance, custodial services. It's our HVAC and mechanical systems. It's also where we coordinate through the government buildings areas, where we coordinate capital projects for government buildings, whether it's City Hall or all of our other buildings. The maintenance staff associated with government buildings, we have 2 maintenance staff associated with government buildings. So those individuals, that's Carlos Barajas and Chian Pham, and they've been with us, both of them, for a number of years, and that's the 2 staff employees that they provide maintenance and repair for 7 government buildings, as well as for our structures and our outdoor complexes. Then, moving down the page a little bit, I think I can do that. The Hannah Community Center building. Now I'm going into the Parks and Recreation Department as far as the budget is concerned. The Hannah Community Center building, that budget of $740,000 roughly, is the cost associated with having this building available for the community and the maintenance and repair associated with it. It is not the staffing and all of that associated with this building or all the activities and what have you, but it's essentially the cost of having this building available to the community. So that's where that particular cost comes in. Where we start looking at the cost associated with the staffing of the building, now we're looking at the Hannah Guest Services right here. And the Hannah Guest Services is going to be the cost associated with our front desk operations. When you came in this morning, you met Missy this morning, and she may have told you where the meeting was going to be at. So that's the cost of running the front desk. The front desk operations is the Hannah Guest Services function, as well as performing all the registration transactions and all the The $2.4 million that I referenced earlier, $2 million of that comes through the front desk for all of the activities, programs, and services. So those folks at the front desk perform all the transactions and collect all the money, answer all the telephone calls. I'm sure they got several calls this morning. Are you going to let us play, or you're not going to let us play, and that type of thing. I'm sure there's a number of those types of calls that we're experiencing this morning already. The other component to what we call handed guest services is sort of our event planning and event management sort of area of the organization. It's the scheduling of the building for rental reservation use. If you want to have a party, if you want to have an activity, if your organization wants to have an event in here, that's where we schedule all of that through the handed guest services, as well as keep an overall schedule for the building. So any of our own classes, city-sponsored classes, or this event goes through the event planning office and is scheduled to make sure we're not double booking facilities and what have you, things of that nature. The other component for the community center really is the Hannah Swim Pool. There again, another cost associated with operating the swimming pool here at the Hannah Community Center. There again, the utilities and what have you are in the building portion of the budget, but the staffing, when we run swim lessons, we have open swim, when we have lap swim, that's the cost for the lifeguards and all of the staff associated with operating that particular operation for us. I think there's a half of a full-time position. And there again, there's an example where you see 1.18 full-time. Well, we don't have, that's a portion of a full-time position, but mainly it's all part-time individuals for that particular area. Moving on from that, then if we look at the school-age care, that is the program that we offer at 5 East Lansing elementary schools. And in addition to the 5 elementary schools, we also offer winter break care in this building through our school-age child care program. We also offer through that program our summer camp in the space that you're in right now. This is summer camp building here, and this is summer camp space during the summer. So it really becomes exclusively summer camp space during the summer. So that's an example of how we multiple uses of this particular facility. Also this year we are piloting a snow day daycare program in this building. So if the school district has a snow day, then on a limited basis we can accept, I think, about 30 or 35 children. They will be in the transitions classroom, which is downstairs, which the East Lansing Public Schools uses on a day-to-day basis for some of their special needs students. So they use that. So they obviously won't be in the building on the snow day. So we'll use that beginning this year. We're going to sort of pilot that. We haven't had a snow day this year. Aquatic Center. This is all the everything associated with operating the Aquatic Center is right in there. So I'm getting a signal from the city manager to move on. So what I've got here is that's kind of an overview of how that's set up and how our department is set up, and you can see all the things that are happening there. So I will end now.
But if you have any questions about specific programs, they're all up there. So does anyone, Arts Festival, softball complex, someone?
I want more information about all those things, but I'll bring them forward after I have a chance to.
And that might be a
poke
good
around.
thing also for the Parks and Rec Commission to see this, to go at some point have a presentation there and have all that detail as well.
Yeah.
They'll get that in April.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Scott?
All right, good morning. So I'm going to describe DPW in small pieces.
Yeah.
So we have approximately 74 programs within DPW showing up here, and we have 21 programs outside of here. We have 12 little boxes up here, which you may or may not see. And with that, we have 77 employees represented up here. And so I'm going to start first going over to the Water Resource Recovery Facility. I'm not going to use the mouse so much. I'm going to try to point more just to guide where we're going. So with that, that's our big regional resource. It supplies, MSU covers 40%, Meridian Township 33%. We have 18 employees there. At there we have 5 programs, and that's maintenance, operation, environmental compliance. Over a year, we'll treat 4.6 billion gallons of wastewater a year and safely release it to the Red Cedar River. We're making tremendous improvements to the plant. but that's not captured up here. You know, we have the $33 million digester, $31 million headworks project going on online right now, and we're planning to spend more there. The reason being, things have reached their useful service life, and we have to fix them to keep them going. We're going to continue on to streets. And so streets there, we have 6 programs there, 9.6 employees attributed to that. And with that, you have the bulk leaf program. You have snow plowing such as today, and I'm going to plow through this, avoiding the pun. But you know, we look at there, we have about 700,000 tied up into that. And we have street sweeping, we have bulk leaf, we have sign maintenance, all those things that we do to extend the service life. And this embodies all the streets. We have about 100 centerline miles of streets in the city. Act 51, where we get money from the state, we have 24 miles of major streets, 62 miles of local street, and we have about 9 miles of trunk line that we maintain under contract with various alleys and private streets tossed in there as well. Some fun facts here. We collect about 700 cubic yards of debris when we street sweep. That's important to protect our watershed and to keep the streets draining. We also collect about 5,000 cubic yards of leaves during the bulk leaf program. That's a lot. Continuing on here, going across the top, I'm going to hit sanitation. Sanitation is our curbside service. It has 3 programs, 7.6 employees. So the big 3 there: recycling, trash collection, yard waste. But with that, there's a lot of implied. There's processing contracts, there's education, there's the drop-off center. So in any given year, we collect approximately 2,000 tons of recycling. Continuing on from there, we have the admin across the top. So admins, when you call someone, you get someone answers the phone, resources, and that's where we have our payroll, our customer complaints. Streetlights is the big rock there, just about $1 million. And so we have a lot of smaller little programs there, and that's 14 discrete little programs that we do that are essential. And we struggled with how many programs to make, but we wanted to give everything enough credence because there are critical things that built upon them. So turning next to the water, going down here. Water is another big program, or a big operation. We have 5 programs, 5.7 employees. Of that, we have 129 miles of water main. We have 3 towers. We have 1 ground storage tank. We buy $1.7 million worth of water from Helmswood each year. That's who provides our water. And with this, within this division, we talk about maintenance, capital improvement, flushing, responding to emergencies. Next, we go to parks maintenance. There's 3 main programs there, and there's approximately 9.5 employees. And with those programs, we have landscape maintenance, urban forestry, and winter maintenance. So, such as today, we have, in this winter maintenance, we spend about $215,000, but that's combined for citywide embodied there. So, over 129 miles of sidewalk, we plow approximately 50 miles of those. That's a lot. And on a day like this is important because it might be a bad day, but if the sidewalk's clear on a major street, you feel safe coming downtown and getting out and being active. Another big program we have is the fleet. The fleet has 3 major programs. We have a fuel station where we sell fuel internally to our customers. We have fleet management, or fleet maintenance and repairs, where our 4.5 mechanics will repair all the vehicles in the fleet: police, fire, DPW, Parks and Rec, and planning. And then we have fleet management, where we purchase, dispose, and we think about how to implement the green fleet policy. In any given year, we'll spend about $1 million in vehicles. And we have about approximately 114 vehicles that take fuel. And with that, we have many other trailers beyond that. The other program is, going to the right of that, we have meter. And so there's 5 major programs in meter, and that takes about 2.5 employees. That's meter reading, complaints, following up with high water bills, lead and copper rule, non-payment, tagging people's doors when they're not paying their bills, and meter reading. So we have just under 8,000 meters out there that those meters read the water that's consumed and help us bill for water and sewer as well. And another program we have is sewer, and sewer has 3 main programs, about 4.6 employees. So with that, for the assets we have there, we have 79 miles of sanitary sewer, 44 miles of combined sewer, 62 miles of stormwater, and it's just up under 186 miles of pipe that convey flow. And with that, the big program: sewer cleaning, sewer televising, emergency response, responding to trouble areas from fats, oils, and grease. So our sewers, last weekend was heavy sewer and heavy winter maintenance. This weekend's heavy winter maintenance, and later today it's probably going to be heavy sewer again as things block up. And another one going next is engineering. Engineering has 13 programs, about 7.1 employees. So with that, Nicole has a staff of six people below her, and with Nicole at 7, and you have me provide an engineering effort as well. Those are environmental programs, those are helping people build things, those are inspecting plans, those are designing plans in-house. Those are ensuring we comply with the soil erosion sedimentation control, that we comply with phase 2 stormwater. Over 500 permits are issued a year.
Where's that box?
With that, every permit has a location, and they help residents that call up and go, hey, water in my backyard. Those are important things that add value. Then we have some smaller ones too. We have downtown maintenance, which you can't quite see the heading there. But there's 3 key programs there, which is downtown snow maintenance, snow removal, maintenance of the built environment, trash collection. There's about 0.3 employees there. And the last program, then we have GIS. So GIS is a small but mighty program. So there's 9 programs there, and it's basically one person. The big thing there is our digital background, where we integrate data and imagery and information and asset management. It helps us see ourselves, helps us plan work, helps us see what we did and didn't do, and helps us track where we're going. So before I get booted, so this is Public Works. We do a lot of things. We help, and you look at the last weekend and this weekend. So last weekend, I'm thinking of Ron and Kathy nonstop, preparing for an ice storm, preparing for a flood. Then this weekend again, preparing for a snowstorm. So there's a lot of effort that goes into planning and reacting to nature and mitigating the effects of nature. And then today, it snowed, and it's going to be horrible for a while, but our team's going to plow it, and we'll keep driving on. So pending your questions.
All your boxes are dark blue.
It's a good point, because it's water, sewer, it's the infrastructure that is absolutely required to run the city.
Can I say poop? If the poop doesn't go down, it's not. All
Let's talk about poop.
Consider this a meeting.
Ruth sets herself a poop quota per meeting. She needs to work it into conversation at least twice.
So,
at this point, those are the 5 big departments.
Okay.
If we want to do finance or HR or anything else, or clerk or library or court, they are willing to go. But in the interest of time, we can cut it at this point. It's up to you.
Okay, yeah. If that's okay with everybody?
Well, I mean, I would like an opportunity to talk about those in the future.
Of course.
I mean, so just not trying to draw this out at all, but like one of my reservations about the PBB system is that a lot of the things that are important to me, parks that we heard from, but arts, library, things that are kind of non-quantifiable beneficial services. There's no poop involved.
No, there's poop involved.
I figured.
I'll guarantee
That's
that.
why you get to be the mayor. I'm gonna try really hard not to swear in public meetings, but anyway, I just worry that it's so analytical and so concrete that the benefit of those more nebulous services is going to be sort of lost. So at some point, I would like to see what the library looks like, so that we can see what a more social program looks like in comparison to police and fire, which are not social, but they're protected.
I mean, that shows up there in terms of the relative darkness right here. So go back to the big picture again, to the big one. So that shows up right there. I mean, if you go back to the tree plot, you can see the darkness in the relative. It shows it by priority here. So when if you want to look at recreation, this shows the tree plot and shows the darkness based on recreational activities or environment. So it hits on different categories. So you have to. That's why Public Works is darker for environmental issues, because it's all protecting the environment, right? Getting rid of wastewater and all that. So it depends on the category you're under, but any of these decisions this is a tool for council, and it's information for the residents. So unless you say, well, I don't think we want a Parks and Rec department anymore, this information is not going to make that decision.
And the pitchfork mob appears at
we're not
City Hall.
But that's an absurd result. We would never do that.
Yeah.
People love the community centers. They love the amenities. That's what enriches and makes a city well-rounded and a great place to live.
Right.
So this information is not going to tell you how you run the city. You run the city. You get to pick the programs. This is just good information for you. So I wouldn't think of it as that means the information is not, let's get rid of the parks. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But
Okay,
if I just walk through the door and I want to look up library, which of these buttons am I going on?
It's all, every program is under each tab. It just shows the emphasis under that item. So safety is not going to be a library function. It's not going to be heavy in library. But if you looked at recreation and culture, library would be darker. This is the overall one, and that's library right there. So library's name doesn't show up for some reason.
Yeah,
the big
we're
button.
still, that's some of the stuff we're trying to work with, that's why we don't want to go live yet.
So Nicole, can you go back to the big picture and show where library sits? Just which is library?
Next to parking. And you
Yeah.
can, if you hover over programs, you see the first line is always going to be the departments. You see library services at the top. So if you don't see a header, just hover over something and
And that's the library. So that's it.
Okay, so in the interest of the fact that I had lots of caffeine for breakfast and maybe you did too, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. I'm not going to say the words because
You already reached your
because
quota.
I've already
for
reached
the
my
meeting.
quota.
Yeah,
But
got it.
can we come back at 9:35 and then we'll do your section?
Future priorities.
Yep. Is that okay with everybody? All right. Thank you. All right, we are back on track.
Okay.
Mr. City Manager.
So now we're talking about future priorities. I was going to be back here, but now looking at that, maybe I can't be back here.
Actually, before you start,
Go
Mr.
ahead. Do you want that?
Lahadas, the thing that that I've been thinking about is this is an important document and we might not get to the depth we
Yeah.
want to. So if we don't, we can schedule a
Yes.
discussion-only meeting to do
What
this?
I was going
or-
to do, even if we were able to get through all of it, we were still going to bring this back to a meeting to have it finalized and approved by council.
Okay.
So we can just spend a little bit more time at that point.
Okay.
And I can just sort of go through and try to hit the high points. You can add things, talk about it, and then we can do more time at a work session and dedicate another hour somewhere else if that's what we want to do.
Is that okay with council?
Yeah, as long as it
Yeah.
comes back, I'm good.
No, I think actually, I think that, we
We
could
could get
devote a work,
introduced.
we could devote a discussion-only meeting to finishing this all up.
Right, and so what we are today is we're going to be introduced, and then we can think about it and do our own research, and then come back and do a more in-depth discussion at a discussion-only meeting.
Sounds good.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, so I'm sorry about the size of this. This is on iCompass, so everyone
this
should
is
have
like-
this. If you want to go to iCompass,
We've got a
oh, you have
copy.
printed copies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's easy.
It's not that
Everyone
much
has a printed
bigger.
copy, so that's easy.
I can zoom in on this.
You can hold it-
I'm
zoom
blinder
in
than
and
I thought I
actually
was.
Just have to put my
Apparently, all of
glasses
this,
on.
like, yeah, they're in the car. I could go get them, but I
So,
should have gone and gotten them.
This is going to be broken amongst the categories that we talked about, the 6 categories. So after each one, we can stop quickly and have a little discussion if council wants to talk more about it. I'm going to just go through them briefly, and then if you have questions, if I can't answer them, we have the directors and program, the managers here who can answer the questions. So newsletter, social media, grow the number of connections and increase engagement across all 3 programs. So the idea here is, as a part of our plan, is to just always increase and get our communications out. We spend a lot of money on communications, and we want to get that to more and more people. It's measurable because we're able to see how many people get our newsletters, how many people open them, and that sort of thing. So it's great. Website management, our plan at this point, we are in the work of a redesign of our website. We're working to make sure the content is going to be thinned out to make sure it's stuff that's active, useful, and up to date, and then be able to put that onto the web. The new website will also work better with mobile, which is important. We'll be bringing that to council in terms of a draft soon to show you what it will look like, and I think you'll be very happy with it. It's a much more contemporary design. Media relations, this is a basic one internally for us about being able to have predetermined press releases in a range of activities around emergencies so that we can more quickly communicate around emergencies, because putting together the press releases takes quite a bit of time, and sometimes that puts a lot of strain on our communications people. Like last week during the emergency, Michael was working feverishly to get those press releases and those media posts out, and we're going to try to have some of that done more in advance. Fleet and maintenance, here you have to go. So this is the program under PBB. This really is the new information for you, the priority, the goal. And then you have to go over here to see what department it is. So kind of getting used to that. When you see fleet building and maintenance, the next two I'm talking about are fire. These are fire department priorities. Track data and assess efficacy, efficiency, and effectiveness of fleet utilization. What's happening here is Chief has made the decision to go to a smaller, fast response, rapid response fire vehicle. And the idea here is to look at different packages that you'd send out through dispatch for different levels of calls so you get the right level of service. Instead of sending $1 million ladder truck down the road to do an ambulance assist, you might be sending a $250,000, essentially like an F-350 heavy pickup truck
And that heavy pickup truck will have a box on the back that has a fire emergency equipment and some ambulance equipment. So it's the right size of apparatus to send, and it also stops the wear and tear like the broken frame that we had on our large truck, because you're sending a much smaller truck. It's also environmental because you're burning less fuel during that process. So a really neat initiative by Fire. We're going to be working to implement that. This data response is basically the Fire implementing a new data management platform to be able to give us good information. This was supposed to be provide support for the Human Relations Commission establishing. It's supposed to actually be provide support to the City Council and Human Relations Commission in establishing a Public Safety Review Board, because we see that essentially it's for council, but we'll also be working on behalf of the HRC, and if that's working with a subcommittee, that's the way it's going to be. So I think we got that. Mark?
Why doesn't this just say establish a public safety review board?
Well, because we're not establishing a public safety. I mean, but if council wants to say that,
this is council's
yes, if council wants to say that, that's great. We can put that way.
All right,
It just seems like we should, if that's our target, that's what we should state it.
But also the thing was that this is supposed to recognize the staff support. This is going to be a lot of work and support and research and doing the work of this subcommittee and that's what the program is going to look like. But we can put it like that as well. So someone can take some notes on that as well. Records management. So this one is basically, this should actually be, and I want to look at it this way in terms of studying the potential of going to a more paperless office. So it's a very big endeavor, but looking at trying to do away with some paper and have records management that is that gets more to PDFs and storage that way rather than having so much physical paper. The reason I say to study it is because it is a huge process and it is a costly process. Our own Chris King has been involved in these type of transitions, and they're difficult. So we want to study it, check the feasibility of it. The promise of a paperless office is great, but it's not easy to implement. So this really is the study and review of it at this point, then making a recommendation if we should move forward with the platform. The next one I think is a very interesting one for us. In the past priorities, you mentioned that we've got a number of billings on the website. This is looking at trying to have more of our applications, more of our permits online, so people can do that type of information and interact online. So you can see here a number of departments: apply for a job, city clerk, communications, finance. If you want information from the city, we're going to try to work to make sure that more of that is web-based and people can do that online. Procurement card, this is kind of a continual one that we talk about and we've never gotten to implement. It's being able to use a procurement card for city purchasing instead of a credit card, and the city can benefit from being able to have rebates. So financially it benefits the city. It also gives us some level of granular control over who's doing purchasing, what kind of stuff you can purchase, where you can purchase from, but that's something we will be bringing back to council before implementing. This is one that I'm particularly interested in, citywide from our office, is a program efficiency to collect and track inquiries on an online portal. The online portal will really be a resident concern tracking. So when people call City Hall, if they get a different operation, they may or may not get an extremely consistent record of where that communication went to. So if you could envision a portal where anyone who calls with a concern and says, my trash can was broken, I want to complain about it, whatever. Just give you an example. We can put that into a system and say at 921 Crown Boulevard, the person called about this, they said their trash can was broken, Public Works went out, they replaced it, and whatever. And now the person is happy, we're good. But then 2 years later, someone calls and says, you broke my trash can 2 years ago and nothing happened there. At least we can look back and have a record of that interaction and say, yes, this is what happened. Or I called and complained about a tree that was leaning over my yard, and I said, could you look at it? And then we can know what happened. Engineering went out and looked at it. Pace went out and looked at it. And then we have a record of what happened. So from customer service point of view, when the city manager passes off citizens to another department for service, we can see that that was passed off and in some way get a record back of the completion of it. And then we're able to track that better for council, say this person has called, what has happened here? And we'll know that in a much better way from a centralized tracking.
If we could, I think that's really, really great. But it would also be nice if it was inclusive of stuff at council meetings as well, because I think we've oftentimes directed members of the community to staff when there are issues, and I think that'd be great if we could do that there.
Yeah, we could figure out a way to do that, yeah. And then if we're entering it by name or by address, and then we can track back and say, yeah,
that person was passed off and that complaint was handled by
Right.
Pace. Pace followed up and did this.
Yep.
And then we have a record of it.
So would this include things like when somebody calls to complain about deer or a wild
I think
dog?
So. I mean,
or
we have to still look at it. I mean, this is supposed to be any sort of an interaction we have with a resident where we did something or looked at something. So I would say yes, and then say that person called about this, and we, you know, or if they're calling about a wildlife complaint, and Kathy DeChambeau talks to them about deer management and what they can do to do plantings. That could be something in there.
But what I'm thinking is it could be really good data for what we have to do. Like if we get 25 calls because one neighborhood has a problem,
Yeah, could
then
you
we
look
know.
at this data in,
Yeah.
in a, you know, there's lots of platforms that do this, and we haven't, that would be part of this process, is reviewing the various platforms and see what product could work for us and what we could do to make that a, you know, so.
Then just in general for all of these, and we'll talk about this more, but I'd like to have a day that, or a year, or when we're trying to get this accomplished, like a goal. Not that it has to be done on that time, but just
Yeah.
so that we know whether we're moving toward it. Because if we don't have a goal of when we're going to get these things done, then we can just keep putting them
Yeah,
off.
so it is, this is supposed to be a 2-year working document, but you would expect that each quarter we would be reporting on progress like we normally have.
But some of them will take more than 2 years, is what I'm saying. Like, if we want to do something that's going to take 10 years, we
Yep.
still want it on here, but we just want to say, we want to move toward it.
Yep, we can look at that. Certainly putting more, trying to put more timelines on it.
I'd like a timeline on everything,
Yep.
if that's okay. All right, thanks. Is that good, Mark?
Police administration pursuing accreditation through the Michigan Association of Chiefs, so ensuring that you're following the best practices and making sure that as your department is working, that you're doing all the things that a progressive department should be doing. Zoning code amendments, update the zoning code in alignment with the comprehensive plan, including downtown form-based code. So this is the one we just talked about with council in terms of planning department. Community services, downtown and community outreach. Maximize the use of downtown parking supply while proactively planning for future needs. So this is the support of the parking task force and the parking department doing the planning work that council also talked about this week. Business attraction, business retention, DDA, and public art. Continue to implement policies to attract more diverse age, use, and daytime populations to live and work in the downtown. So this is the outreach and economic development work that Tom and his department do to try to make the downtown diverse. It's like trying to get the outreach meetings with MSUFC, bringing these different players downtown to make a diverse downtown. So that's really a broad category. Business attraction, redevelopment support, encourage additional employment-centered development. This really is focusing on the office-type development of that. And then, actually, I'm sorry, I didn't get to mention, we switched from good governance to vibrant economy. When we talk about good governance, is there anything else that people have any thoughts for us on good governance that you'd like us to look at or think about?
I think we'll have more stuff at the next meeting when we talk about
I've got some comments about a few of these, but I feel like this is not the right time to get into it.
Yeah.
We can do it.
And actually, what might be really efficient is if we sent all our comments via email, and then when this comes back, they'll be incorporated.
But make sure we share those.
But it has
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah, CC everybody, yeah.
But
Or-
don't
or-
discuss it.
Yeah.
because-
No, we can discuss it. No, we
Well,
can.
we can't really.
Well, if you're delivering towards a policy answer,
Oh,
so.
all right.
Yeah.
I have it, that, you're right. So why don't we have it, everybody email George,
And then what I can do is I can actually send out a list to
Aggregate it.
say
Yeah.
this is the stuff
Yeah.
aggregated by name. And then when we come to a meeting, we
We'll
can
talk
actually
about it.
discuss it.
Yeah.
Because this is supposed to be like the consensus of
Right,
council.
okay,
So
sorry.
that it's not a program from one person. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be.
Yeah.
That way.
Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds great.
We'll send you lots of things.
It's going to be super fun. Your box is going to get bigger.
No, he doesn't get a bigger box, he just works more hours.
Vibrant economy development, I've already gone through a portion of this. The final one was redevelop evergreen properties and upgrade surrounding infrastructure while balancing the desired use of manage debt and liability. So that's really the RFP process and the engineering work around redevelopment, completion and redevelopment of that area. So,
Yeah, like a timer.
Boom.
in the area of vibrant economy development, any questions or thoughts about that? Anything you want more explanation on?
No, not right now.
Just because it's bugging me, the DDA Public Artworks, is that DDA and Public Artworks, or is that just DDA's Public Art? Because we have a whole art commission that is also doing a whole bunch of public art.
in the downtown.
That's
In the
just
downtown?
that's just the DDA focused and funded stuff. So
Okay. I wish they would cooperate with the Arts Commission when they do public art downtown. It's very frustrating. So.
Well, DDA, so by law, by ordinance, every time something is built, it has to have public art. And that's not.
No. So what she's referring to, and I will make it very,
DDA
very
keeps
short.
commissioning murals without telling us they're commissioning
Yeah.
murals. And we have a public art fund that we could like match their money with, and if we knew that it was happening, but instead we find out after it's started.
So give me an example.
The Groovy Opportunity mural, we didn't know anything about it until after it had been through art selection. And that was something that we could have matched funds on. We could have, done a community program around it. I would have loved to have more input on the front end of that.
So that one was kind of a timing issue where we had the opportunity to do this program, and I think we kind of we did try to partner with the art selection panel, but this year our goal is to get ahead of it quicker and have it be so we can go through the full process and actually do the partnership. But there definitely is a priority for art installation on the DDA, and certainly working together with the Arts Commission is part of that. So. Cool.
Any other questions about vibrant economy and development? Safe, strong, diverse communities. So, code amendments, property code enforcement. Update the city's current property maintenance code to align with the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code. So every several years we go back and we realign with a more recent version of the Property Maintenance Code. This is essentially what allows us to do enforcement on properties, rental houses that have things that are broken, if it's broken windows and so on. This is just updating the Property Maintenance Code. Community outreach, continue to implement the 6 pillars of 21st century policing, including community policing, crime reduction, technology, social media, and officer training and education. That's the broad category we just talked about. Chief will give an update on that. Diversity and inclusion, I think this is an important one in terms of focusing to make sure that we're stressing that diversity and inclusion is an important part of everything we do. New program initiative, we're looking to implement a broad initiative for all of our employees. In past years, we've done training for all of our employees in the areas of safety and workplace violence. This next year we want to do a focus and then continue that focus on diversity and inclusion for all of our employees. Obviously it's a pretty big endeavor to bring 600 employees in over a number of days, but that's the type of thing we would be looking at to do for that. Diversity and inclusion, this really comes from the court, increase the pool of qualified interpreters to assist court proceedings for non-native English speakers, so that's always something that's a challenge if you have someone who's not a native English speaker, to make sure that they have access to a interpreter. And then senior services come under here with a number of different activities, age-friendly communities process, expanding community partnerships, and they have an interesting going paperless as well. Cadet program is what the Chief Talifarro talked about. This is specifically putting a cadet program that's more similar to the cadet program in police into fire. It's to help with recruitment overall, but it's also to help with diversity and recruitment, because it is particularly challenging to have a diverse pool of candidates in fire. And I think that the cadet program in police has helped us have more diversity by getting people in during college and then sponsoring them through the academy. So that's something we'll be working on as a new program for cadets. Anything
I have
under
one thing.
strong, safe, diverse
Yes.
community?
Under diversity and inclusion, can we somehow in our goals include ADA accessibility in that? I've already heard 3 complaints in the month and a half that I've had this job about lack of curb cuts, and there's a few other things that I've noticed that sort of trigger my alarm bells in that regard. So can we
So
put
there's
that in?
supposed to be an ADA plan. Scott, do you want to talk about that ADA plan in terms of citywide hitting on infrastructure that's ADA accessible?
So there's 2 parts of ADA. There's planning, and neighborhood development has a part where they're looking at new development and new construction. We look at the public right-of-way ADA ramps for sidewalks and in compliance when we build there.
So it's supposed to be a continual process.
So I think if we could also include, part of compliance is also user experience. So I think we have some stuff that's technically compliant but actually not very pleasant to use. And one of the things, and I haven't had a chance to talk to planning and zoning about it, but the 17-foot high ground floor retail bays downtown also sort of bothers me, because we've got things going in where you've got half of the business space is in an inaccessible loft that cannot be accessed by anybody that cannot go up a flight of stairs. So, like, yes, we have more square footage of real estate or retail space, but half of it can't be used by anybody that's got like mobility issues. So there's just some stuff like that I would like to make sure we talk about in our diversity inclusion.
Are you talking about Foster Coffee, for instance?
Well, they've got one, but functionally speaking, not everybody has to build out a second loft in there, but you've got a very shallow bay with a very high ceiling, and so in order to get more space in there, you put a loft, and you're not going to put in a wheelchair lift to get up to a half-story loft,
But that would be like a change to the zoning code, so that we would require that any space be handicap or accessible, because they're compliant with ADA. They're just not compliant with how you want ADA to be installed, so that...
Well, that goes to
that
the
would
user
be-
experience part of it. Like, you can get in the door, you can do business with the people, but like if there's a meeting that takes place in the loft, then you can't get there, right?
So
like,
I'm saying that that's an ordinance change that we can make
Yeah.
very easily, and that if that's a priority for us, we should, I don't know where that would go on this.
Well,
but
I
we
mean,
can put that in.
I didn't mean to spring this on you in a public meeting, but if we're talking about goals for diversity inclusion, I want to make sure
No,
that
we can
accessibility
certainly
is
do
part
that,
of
because that's an issue that came up in the past, like when Hopcat was building out their loft area, and they had to put an elevator in. At that point, council made that decision to say that they need to do that.
Yeah.
So that could be decisions that you have, so we should capture that in terms
Yeah.
of...
But I mean, I also don't want to mandate that everybody that comes in downtown has to put in an elevator. That's $1,000, multiple thousands of dollars of
Yes,
infrastructure.
I mean,
That's not necessarily part of their plan, So like, anyway, we need to talk about it. I just-
At that ramp, if we had thought about it ahead of time, we could have built something behind.
Yeah,
so with
second floor
handi-
access.
Yeah, with just through the ramp or through the elevator. And
I mean, I don't know, just maybe that's audits of new businesses by, an outside consultant to do.
Yeah, perhaps during the site plan process to look at the issues of accessibility and see if there are areas where we want to exceed ADA accessibility.
Yeah.
Because I know that if it's, Tom probably knows more about this, but if the raised area is only a certain square footage or a certain size proportion to the whole building, then you don't have to do that. But you're right, that does exclude people.
Yeah.
So it's an important issue.
So I think, I'm sure that all of our zoning codes are technically in compliance, but I also want to, consider user experience as part of that.
Excuse me. Environmental sustainability have a lot of exciting things here, which is great. Patrol operations transition to partially to hybrid ELP patrol vehicles. So over the next year, by 2020, purchasing 5 new vehicles that would be the new hybrid. So it's the same looking vehicle. It's a police package, a police vehicle, but it'll have a full hybrid engine in it. And quite a bit of savings. They estimate $3,500 in annual savings. Even it turns off the engine during idling time. If police tend to idle their cars, so they're ready to go. And this keeps the engine warmed up essentially, but lets the vehicle not idle continuously. And then if that experience goes well after the first year, the following year we would go with all hybrid, a full hybrid police fleet, which would be, is it 20 vehicles or 18 patrol cars?
Some 13 in there. It's $3,500 per vehicle.
Per vehicle, it's a savings per year estimate. So that's a great opportunity there. Regional recycling, big news, obviously we're working with the City of Lansing, and MTerra is the private provider that's going to come in and put a regional, it's called a MRF, Materials Recovery Facility, in the City of Lansing, and that's going to be able to take our recyclings from us in the City of Lansing locally. So instead of having to bundle our recycling and send it elsewhere, all the recycling will be handled here. Scott, when will that sort of facility be up and running, do you think, when constructed?
So they're starting on that. They're probably a year out, and they're looking at midsummer kind of practically. She was just talking to them yesterday. But the other one will give them an opportunity to pull in more local users.
Yeah, so hopefully more regional recycling, because the 2 big cities are doing recycling there with this local, and also it's an economic thing because they'll be building the plant here, employing people here, and also you don't have the fuel costs of transporting materials, which is just great.
George, I'm going to ask 2 things on this.
Yep.
So both of these are somewhat requests, and I'm looking at Scott, so I apologize for making your bubble a little bit bigger. I want a presentation at council, and I want a communication to ASMSU on this. I understand the timeline constraint, and every single time I have the conversation with somebody about multifamily recycling, it was obviously an issue when I was a student here and living in an apartment. It's still an issue for me now. I mean, I live in the northern tier, so luckily I have access to the recycling plant. I have to kind of give a general explanation that we're working on it, we're working on it. Trust me, we're working on it, it's a big priority, but it's not out there that we are. So I'd really love something in public, even if we're not going to be doing it right now, and that's 100% fine, we're working towards it, just saying that we're going to do it.
So you're talking
because
about
it's-
going back and capturing the buildings that don't have multi-unit recycling, because going forward, we do put recycling into new developments.
And what this will provide is the site for additional growth in the private business arena.
Oh, yeah.
And so this
Can I
will do
interrupt?
that.
I'm sorry. I have to go. My dog is gone. I'm going to go find him. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Can I take over, Mr. Mojo?
Yep.
But we definitely do that.
Okay, that'd just be great, just so we have a little bit more explanation when we're talking to, especially students. It's a big issue for them.
And part of this also is this issue about going back and having places that, the concern that you'll hear from the landlords is...
Oh, no, I know the complete
No,
concern, and I understand
I'm just
completely the
stating out-
timeline.
I'm stating out for everybody also,
Yeah.
is that they'll say they don't have the space for it because they didn't build it into their plan, and back then it wasn't required. But council still can go back and begin to look at mandating that for these developments that started before we required it. So that could be a policy decision from council to have the discussions, hear the input, and then try to push for that direction overall.
Yeah, and I'm open to having that conversation. I think from what I've gotten from Scott and Kathy DeChambeau, we do need to have this facility here for something like that to work and be cost efficient. So, and I'm 100% cognizant of that.
Yep.
I don't want to be in the position of kind of constantly saying we're working on it, but without having some kind of firm timeline out there.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Solar infrastructure. So this is looking at a number of opportunities to implement infrastructure regarding solar to obviously to reduce our carbon footprint. We have a number of cool projects here. One is looking at the solar field out in Public Works. We have that great piece of property in front of the building where we want to look at actually doing our own solar installation. I think that's a really cool opportunity. We'll be bringing that back to council once we have a little bit more detail on the planning of it, and then talking with council about how you want to proceed. So we'll have a recommendation for that hopefully in the coming months. Coleman Road extension, we saw back in PDB we spend a lot of money on street lighting, about $1 million a year we're paying on for energy costs to BWL or consumers. So we see there a great opportunity to be able to move to solar street lighting. Obviously sustainable, and we can save money. So what we want to do with Coleman Road is try to put solar street lights there so we can see how they work. Are we satisfied with the performance of them? Is the technology good enough where we don't have to pay a bill to BWL to power street lights? We're just putting the street light there, it's sustainable, it's green, and we're not spending any more money on it. Obviously there's maintenance issues, but that's different. So that's a really neat one in terms of a pilot. And then distributed solar arrays, potentially anywhere where we're going to do improvements to infrastructure, to building, can we look at doing solar? And we'll see the library popping up later with some HVAC work where we could look at doing that type of a solar or green initiative with that.
George, can I interrupt for just a
Yes.
second? We do have at the Patriarch Park Pavilion and Restrooms Project, we'll have a solar array on one of the restrooms when we renovate that.
Awesome.
To power that restroom itself.
Power that restroom.
That's awesome. So, and then vehicle infrastructure, vehicle charging infrastructure. So this is identifying opportunities to have vehicle charging infrastructure as we look in the future to going to green vehicles or battery-powered vehicles, looking where we can do that. I think this is one of those ones that maybe if we combine with solar, our own solar, if you could imagine doing charging stations at Public Works from solar. So if we have our own fleet of green vehicles, we're charging our vehicles from solar, and it's totally green, and there's no power even going to our vehicles. So that's sort of like when we can look to combine things and have some really exciting projects.
So I appreciate the fact that police has a question mark next to it. In this, I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but it is funny. So
I don't know exactly. Yeah, I didn't see that.
But yeah, I was recently at a Future Cities forum put on by MML, and we got an explanation and a little bit of a presentation of like a concept for a completely electric fleet, police and buses, some public transportation, and I think obviously the technology is not there yet, but it will be,
Yes.
and I think when I talk about future modes of transportation. You know, we tend to talk 30, 40 years in advance, automated cars. I think this is more like a 10-year thing, potentially. So,
well, because I actually looked into this issue. Past council member asked us to look at the issue of going to battery-powered police cars.
Yeah.
And this police can't be bleeding edge. They got
Yeah.
to maybe sort of a little more to cutting edge, because police and fire are mission critical.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to work. So when you look at those hybrid vehicles, those have been tested elsewhere, and it's going to look a whole lot like the car that's right outside now, the police SUV, the Ford SUV. That car has so much particular police technology in it. That car can take a 75 or 80 mile an hour rear end crash on a highway.
right.
And another car may not come near that survivability. So that police package, those fire packages are so specific, but that's why going to the hybrid is a good intermediary step, because the technology is there, hopefully, for hybrid.
Yeah.
So we get to that, and then it's going to maybe 5 years down the road, then we're looking at battery with the next iteration. But you're
Right.
not there yet, but that's something we definitely want to
Yeah, I want to keep it as
But
a
perhaps on code enforcement and things where our inspectors are driving around the city.
Exactly.
That's where
That
you can look
is-
at battery,
yeah.
because if the battery dies, it's not the end of the world.
right.
But that's something that I'd love to look at.
I would love to actually have that as a note in here. If we could, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
To look at green, and that's something we've been talking about internally. We just haven't gotten the car price, the car performance down to that level yet, but I think we're hopefully getting closer to that.
Awesome.
So that's pretty exciting.
George,
Yes.
before you leave there, our last strategic priorities clearly stated that, you know, we were moving towards 100% renewable energy in government operations anyway. It's not here now.
We could put it in.
But 3 of those items clearly move us in that direction, but I think we still need to have that objective statement.
Yeah, because a lot of this stuff is moving that direction, and I think completely. That should be our goal, is completely 100% green city.
So
Yes,
I think
we got
it needs to be added.
Yep. Enhanced transportation and infrastructure. So this is a lot of particular projects. I'm not going to go through them all. I'm just going to hit some high points, but there's a lot of work being done here, a lot of great work. So a lot of the stuff is going to come from Parks and Recreation first. Infrastructure, renewal, and asset management. So actually, this is Public Works. So these are Public Works projects that are really underway, or soon to be planned. So we see 11 million of Harrison Road sewer going to be completed shortly. Whittingham Pump Station is about halfway completed, a large project. We see initiating, so this is not the study of the Evergreen utilities, this is actually initiating and putting that into place. The next 5-year WRF, what is the water resource recovery going to be in terms of our next 5-year plan for those improvements? Because that is a significant investment by this community in those resources. And then obviously a big one, continue to invest in neighborhood street water and sewer improvements. So over the quarters, you'll see ticking off projects that we're doing, lane miles, all that sorts of improvements that we're doing here. Non-motorized transportation plan, update the non-motorized plan, identify and prioritize areas, bike lane, sidewalk gaps, closure. This is something that Mark has talked to me significantly about in our northern tier, looking to close gaps, and especially with Coleman Road going in, how do we extend walkability down that Coleman Road corridor? So something we're going to be looking at. But also bringing back, is our plan to bring the, when would we have a non-motorized plan that we would want to show?
So we're going to be releasing the RFP this year. We're getting input. So the MSU class at the Transportation Commission helped identify some things. So we're going to reframe that, push that out. So it's going to take, so the longer we put it out there to seek input, and it's more student, and this is a more challenging plan as the various modes of transportation challenge us.
So at some point there'll be a draft that we can take back to
Yeah,
council for discussion.
I think it would be realistic next winter before we get that back. We have funding for it this year. We want to get enough public engagement and pull people's input in.
Great. Library facilities, this is what I mentioned. They're looking at doing next iterations of library facility improvements to the exterior. Also looking at the HVAC systems where there could be green. You know, these infrastructures are very costly to put in, hundreds of thousands of dollars for HVAC systems. Can they be green, more sustainable? And also looking at completing their Transit Connect for pop-up mobile library, so that they can take the library out to the community more. So
I've got a question about that, George.
Sure.
Out of curiosity, is there any thought or analysis going forward as to expansion of the library?
I thought about it every day.
Well, I mean, shouldn't we, if that's
Yeah.
the case, then should we begin that look this year? Because we have something coming up in a couple of years that we're going to have to address.
Yeah, actually, I have a plan from C2AE. They actually did a plan for us expanding, pushing out north, the meeting room, and then that whole wall, and then expanding also west. And they actually did that for free for us because I was asking, you know, what this might look like, because we're doing the children's garden, which could be affected by that if we push out the library or push out the building, as well as the HVAC systems. So yeah, it's in my head.
Okay, sounds good.
Need about $5 million worth.
No
No problem.
Richard,
Just double the income tax.
no.
So this is continuing infrastructure, enhanced transportation infrastructure. So this is a number of parks projects. A number of parks projects that we're looking to implement over the coming year. Patrick Park Pavilion, Patrick Park Tennis Courts and Pickleball. An interesting one, important one for the mayor, I'm sure.
Only thing better than the sewers.
What's that?
Pickleball?
It's the only thing better than the sewers for.
It's pickleball. Well, we got to say
Pickleball.
pickleball and poop in the same meeting.
So we see that some of these are in various states of approval and planning. These are ones that we're looking at going forward. This one is a pretty interesting one for council. Review and recommendation by the Hannah Community Center Committee regarding consideration of voter-approved measure to fund reinvestment in Hannah and the park system. So what we have here is we have the Hannah Committee made a recommendation to look at a bond to sustain parks infrastructure. Staff will be meeting, fine-tuning this $16 million number that we had talked about in the past. I don't know if that number shows up here. It does right there. That Tim has identified in a rough estimate of money we would need to reinvest in this building and all of our parks infrastructure, and then looking at a recommendation to council about how we would fund that in terms of potentially a future bond. And then we'll have that discussion with council in the coming months. Fleet maintenance and readiness, infrastructure to support and provide optimal service to the community, replacing overhead doors. Basically, the fire station, our Fire Station 1 hasn't really had an internal renovation since probably the 1960s when it was built, Chief. I mean, if you look at the kitchen there, it really is a 1960s kitchen, and there are people who live there every day. So we're looking to reinvest in the doors, which is a safety issue and service issue, but also in the interior of that building. So we'll be bringing more information back to council on that. City Hall repairs and maintenance. This gets to an important issue. The City Hall emergency management systems, so the alarm systems, future building maintenance, looking at the roofs. So all of that stuff, which is really nothing to improve the service of the building, and we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. That gives you a sense of the needs for that building, to keep that building up to speed and in place. And, you know, we sort of talked about the need to look overall how much we're investing in our City Hall operation and what we can do in the future.
George, briefly, when you talk about some of those things that an overlap too, like environmental, some of the overhead and garage doors are very inefficient right now, and you know, you just got to do different things and the maintenance on them. So they're also a part of that effort to get toward, you know, environmentally sustainable green and other things, and it sort of captures things with those infrastructure improvements.
Yeah, because of the better insulation and all that, instead of having the doors seeping all the heat.
Hey, George, before you leave that last one, just sort of a general comment on this is that, you know, at least for me, I see this strategic priorities as our version of, or an analogous version of the capital improvements program. So the target dates that Ruth mentioned seem to be really missing in the first part of this, as opposed to the Parks and Rec stuff. It seems very specific in terms of what's happening and when we expect it to be. I think it needs to be in there. There's also one other thing that has come up over the last year, which is, and I know we just passed a resolution regarding communications from Public Works on specific projects, but I think it should be in here too, that communication objectives with regard to these specific projects should be in this as well.
Yep. Got it. And that's something we've already talked to Public Works about, is communications, is enhancing communications around projects to make sure we're doing more outreach. Got it. Recreational and cultural opportunities. So this is a number of the infrastructure projects around recreation and culture. We see the first one is complete the Patrick Park ball fields, Bailey Neighborhood Park, the White Trail connections, the Northern Tier Trail signage, and finish the bridges and trails improvements. So this is really finishing existing projects. These are all projects that will be completed in 2020. The next is a number of improvements to the Hannon Community Center. Some of these are already sort of in process. This is the concrete around the pool. This is the phase 2 of the lighting and sound to the theater. This is looking then, the planning for the replacement of the boiler, the emergency system, so again, the alarm system, and looking at the roofing systems and also the facade for one of the parts of the building. So those are at the planning stage and not necessarily listed as projects, but as sort of the engineering and architecture on those. Softballs and soccer complex and softball. Improvements to the drainage improvements and also softball complex bench improvements. These are smaller projects to improve both those facilities. Aquatic Center have a number of things. The big one in 2021 is the replacement of the liner of the pool, which is a $150,000 item, and then an engineering study on the underground infrastructure in the Aquatic Center with a plan to replace that infrastructure in the future. And of course, this is sort of the general catch-all department marketing and promotions, encourage active, healthy, and creative lifestyles. So this is looking at ongoing review of the programs and offerings of the Parks and Rec Department to make sure that they are meeting the needs of the community in demand and also that they're financially sustainable to the extent possible. And with that,
A quick thing on the pool, that includes replacing or removing the interior items too that are old, like the little slide and the big mouth thing.
At the Aquatic Center?
Yeah.
We have one that's slated for, it's when the liner comes in, one of those will be replaced. It's the pools and falls, it has to be replaced. Really.
Okay.
So that one for sure. We have a slide restoration project that's going to happen probably in the next 2 or 3 years. That's probably knocking on the door of $100,000.
So are any of those dangerous though, or are these?
Slide is not dangerous. The pools and falls, we fixed that, so it's not dangerous.
Okay.
But we want that to come out when we do the liner, so
Okay.
because we'll be in there doing that kind of work.
Okay.
One thing that I'd like to include on this is that the Arts Commission is, for like the last year and a half has been kicking around the idea of doing a cultural arts plan, a planning document for arts. And I think we just had a shake-up on the Arts Commission, so I'm not sure where we're at with that, but I would like to make that a priority for myself to spearhead forward, and I see that document as having relation to library, parks, planning. I'd like it to be a more complete document than maybe the Arts Commission was originally planning. So just in the same way that we listed the oversight committee, assisting with the creation of that committee, I'd like to add assisting with the creation of a cultural arts plan, just to have a planning document on
so
Uh,
that's
file.
a sub-plan, a comprehensive plan in some way. Have we done that in the past through like the Arts Council? And Tim, I guess I'm looking to see, is that how we've handled it in the past, and now we want to do that more directly?
There hasn't been that in the
I've
past.
heard this discussion a number of times. I don't know how we've handled it.
We've run into it's been going for a long time, so it might be the same discussion. We reached out to the Greater Lansing Arts Council to see if they had resources, and they were really going in kind of a different direction. And we felt that we needed something that was much more focused on East Lansing. But I think rather than just addressing our public art, I'd really like that to be kind of a cultural programming snapshot, which includes Parks and Recreation, and includes library. The DDA keeps messing around with art, even though they're not qualified. It's fine. They are. It's fine.
So does some of that touch upon the 5-year plan that we just passed for Parks and Recreation, or is that this is focusing more on art and doesn't have an overlap with
I
that?
think what I'm hearing is a far more focus on not just the public art, but cultural arts programming, and as sort of a larger picture for the community.
I think the impetus from the Arts Commission was really this public art fund that has a fluctuating but fairly generous balance due to the percent for art, and just sort of a sense of responsibility towards that money to make sure that it is, that it is implemented in the community in a responsible fashion with thought. Yeah, but it's not just commissioning a sculpture here or there, but it's really part of a plan. But I think I tease the DDA about their murals, but really I think having a cultural document that is citywide that can be used as kind of a reference for many different departments.
got it.
when looking at public art would be of benefit. So I'd like to move forward with
Would you
that.
see something like?
We put out an RFP, and the money came back significantly higher than we were willing to spend.
Yeah,
so I
not-
think
not
that
worth the-
it's not going to be that type of a process because we just can't afford it. We can't afford $70,000 for an arts plan. It's just not. That's not ever going to be in the budget. So I wanted to try to reframe that discussion in terms of resources that we already have, which is the department head. Sorry guys. You know, and just kind of. Anyway, I'd like it to not get waysided. I'd like
We could
to
just look-
Do you
continue
see it
forward.
as the HANA committee, like something like the HANA committee could do this?
I think I would rather not form the shape of that discussion because the Arts Commission has already done kind of a lot of thought on this. I don't want to completely railroad them, but I think having a task force is one of the things that has been one of many possible
Well,
roads. of-
that gives us the ability to put a couple of people for planning.
Yeah.
You know, it still would be
Yes.
mainly populated by people from the Arts Commission, but, you know, sort of Tim's
Right.
group would then
Allow
be
us
the resource
to pull in
without
other
that.
resources.
Okay.
I think yes. So.
We could do a resolution on that. Take care of it.
No, it's not taste. I mean, it's really as we've.
You know, I suggested
Yeah.
doing a task force. They did not. We're not so
Well,
receptive to.
we had a coup, so
Oh,
nothing
fair.
is the same on the Arts Commission.
I've
as it
been out
was
for a
week
month and
ago.
there's a
Yes,
coup, so-
there's been a complete
Hopefully it was a
change of
bloodless
leadership.
coup.
What's that?
Hopefully it was a bloodless coup.
Yes, there was no blood involved.
Stop with the
So
chit
that's-
chat.
So that's all for our presentation. If there's anything else you want to add or add it through email, then we can compile the list of things that we've said to add.
Yes.
We can discuss each one in turn and then have that discussion in the work session and finalize the document.
And when do you think that will be?
We can go back and put dates on these things to the extent of where we can, as specific as possible. And then I
Like
think
what-
February is already kind of full, so I
So
think we have to
maybe
look at
March. Yeah.
perhaps March. We'll see.
Okay, is that good? Mark?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
You good with that, Lisa? Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming. At this point, you can get in your cars and drive away if you want. You don't need to stick around for the rest of the meeting. It's going to be really short.
We have more.
Number 5 is communication from council members. Anything?
I feel like I've said everything.
Drive careful.
Yes.
Thanks, DPW.
Yes, be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks for plowing me into my. Never mind.
I did have one thing.
Well done. Efficient plowing.
Scott, I still got leaves to pick up.
Mr. Talifarro, Brandy, I'm really glad that you're back full-time again on your second year in just East Lansing. I really appreciate that you're here.
Yes, we love
That
having
you
you.
made that choice. Communications from the city manager,
Just to thank everyone for being here and appreciate council's time.
and we are adjourned.